My childhood best friend Marie and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright out, but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. We hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then the sound of running footsteps follows. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement light off. We pick up speed as much as we can without breaking into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop is only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks. We are in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop. And I go along with it silently, understanding ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems whatever scared her is nowhere in sight at this point. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, had a terrible smirk on his face, and she swore that he stopped running. She saw him put something shiny away in his coat. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, giving the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God, given me, just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale, lifting a hand to point to what she's seeing. I turn, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time as the sun got lower and lower. We did manage to have someone come with the truck, but by the time we reached the shore it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't have been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop, inform an adult, and ask her parents to come get us then. But it worked out. We got back safe, and we thankfully never saw that man again. This story takes place back when I was a Boy Scout. I am 28 now, but I still think about what happened, or almost happened, some 15 years ago. It was summer camp back in 2008. My Boy Scout troop would go away for a week deep in the forest, and we'd do your typical outdoor activities: fishing, hiking, roasting marshmallows over the campfire, that sort of thing. We'd camp at a national park which had several campsites with lean-tos, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically a small cabin with only 3 walls and the front being completely open. A lot of us would put a tarp over the opening as sort of a temporary 4th wall, mainly to keep the bugs out and for some privacy. This would also keep out most animals trying to find any of our snacks. The first day we were there was mainly just everyone unpacking all the gear we need for the week, as the park didn't allow us to keep any vehicles on site. If I remember correctly, there were about 10 or so kids between ages 14 to 17, as well as 4 adults. All the adults would stay in their own lean-to, and the kids had to divide up into 3 of the lean-tos. I remember my friend Devin and I weren't able to get into the same one, which was kind of a bummer, but I was okay with it since he was big into pranks and would always be messing with me and my stuff. which for the record gets old real quick when you're stuck with them for a whole week. Another thing is that Devin gets really bad night terrors and will literally scream like he's getting his head chopped off in the middle of the night. It's pretty unsettling to hear, but all of us are used to it by now. Anyways, it was the end of the first day and the sun was starting to go down. We had all gathered around the campfire and relaxed for a while as it got dark. Now let me reiterate how deep in the woods we were. This was back before smartphones were a big thing, but the few people that had Blackberries and Nokias struggled to get service most of the time. So we were basically in no man's land, and the only time we'd see anyone else was the occasional hiker during the day, which was honestly kind of rare. As we sat around the fire, the adults were telling scary stories to try and scare us, but us being teenagers, it didn't really strike the fear of God into us like they were hoping, so after a few of their stories, we decided to go to bed. Once I was in the lean-to, one of the other kids set up his flashlight by hanging it from the ceiling by a string so that we could see. After that, we all got into our sleeping bags and just talked about the stuff normal teenagers talked about. Girls, video games, drama from school, etc. After about a half hour of this, we all must have dozed off to sleep, because I was awoken by some sound of our tarp rustling, and the flashlight that we forgot to shut off was swinging back and forth pretty quickly from someone bumping into it. I assume one of my bunkmates got up to go to the outhouse, but the light from the flashlight quickly proved me wrong, as everyone in the lean-to was still fast asleep. I was then trying to figure out why someone would have come into our lean-to in the middle of the night, and then I breathed a sigh of relief when I realized it must have been Devin pulling another one of his pranks. And then, just like a scene out of a movie, Devin's night terror scream pierces the silence of our campsite. Like I said, this is common for him to do, and normally it wouldn't freak me out. But if Devin was asleep, then who was just in our lean-to? My heart starts racing as I am frozen in my sleeping bag, and then I hear footsteps rapidly sprinting out of our campsite and into the forest. At this point, I'm freaking out, because obviously whoever was just in our lean-to was not part of our group. After a minute, I come to my senses and rush to the adults and wake them up to tell them what happened. And to my shock, the scoutmaster told me it was probably a hiker that got lost or something. Even though I protested this, he told me to go back to sleep. I lay awake in my tent for probably an hour, and I swear I could hear footsteps circling the campsite, but it seemed so far in the distance, and I still don't know if I was psyching myself out. Eventually, though, somehow I managed to fall asleep. In the morning, I woke up to the adults frantically running around, telling everyone to pack their things, which confused me. I then saw the scoutmaster, who had a look on his face that I'll never forget, and he apologized for not taking me seriously the night before. Apparently, one of the kids found a machete, probably about 1.5 feet long, covered in dry blood, behind my lean-to. That feeling of anxiety quickly returned, as I know that it belonged to whoever was in our lean-to the previous night. After that, one of the adults had to go into town to report the incident to the police, and it was safe to say our week of summer camp was cut short after one night. I'm forever grateful that nothing ended up happening to anyone that night, and I don't know if I want to know what that person had planned, or why they had dried blood on their machete. But my theory is that when they were in our lean-to while we were asleep, Devin must have had a night terror scream, which caused him to panic and get out, which rustled the tarp that woke me up. And then Devin screamed a second time, which then made them run away back into the woods and drop their weapon in the process. Although, that is only a theory, so I'll never truly know what could have happened.